Welcome back. We are in Numbers chapter 13, and I was talking to somebody about ways to kind of get this a bigger audience, get this out to more people, and he had a number of suggestions. But my goal is obviously to get this out to everybody on the planet uh, in some form or fashion. But really, my joy is when you share it. It's when each one of you just share it with a friend or tell someone about it, and they join, because then I just know the community's growing. And it's not through marketing or anything like that. I'm not against any of that. I just love that authentic, organic growth is really what we're supposed to be doing as Christians, just sharing the Word of God. And so I hope you do that. Today we are in Numbers chapter 13. I'm going to read from the Complete Jewish Bible, and we're going to skip about 10 verses because they basically link the person with the tribe. And that's important, but I don't think it's important that I read it all to you. So let's go. Adonai said to Moshe, "Send men on your behalf to reconnoiter the land of Canaan." And that just means to explore, "which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each ancestral tribe, send someone who is a leader in his tribe." Moshe dispatched them from the Paran desert as Adonai had ordered. All of them were leading men among the people of Israel. Here are their names. Now, in the New Living Translation, it says this, verse 1. "The Lord now said to Moses, send out men to explore the land of Canaan, the land I am giving to the Israelites. Send one leader from each of the 12 ancestral tribes." So in the New Living Translation, it sounds like this was God's idea. But in the Complete Jewish Bible, we get it better because it says, "Send men on your behalf," meaning you're the one that's questioning it. And then it says to reconnoiter the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the people of Israel. Like, there's no fear here. I'm going to do it. You're going to be successful. But he said, this is all on y'all, not me. So don't go out in my name. So we skip down to verse 16, where it says, "These are the names of the men Moshe sent out to reconnoiter the land." Moshe gave to Hoshea, the son of Nun, the name Joshua. Joshua is where we'll see that. Moshe sent them to reconnoiter the land of Canaan, instructing them, "Go up to the Negev and into the hills, and see what the land is like. Notice the people living there, whether they are strong or weak, few or many, and what kind of country they live in, whether it is a good or bad, and what kind of cities they live in, open or fortified. See whether the land is fertile or unproductive, and whether there is wood in it or not. Finally, be bold enough to bring back some of the fruit of the land." When they left, it was the season for the first grapes to ripen. They went up and reconnoitered the land from the Zin desert to Rehob near the entrance to Hamath. They went up into the Negev and arrived at Hebron. Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the Achaim, lived there, the Amalekites. They came to the Eshcol Valley, and they cut off a branch bearing one cluster of grapes, which they carried on a pole between two of them. They also took pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol cluster, because of the cluster which the people of Israel cut down. 40 days later, they returned from reconnoitering the land and went to Moshe, Aaron, and the entire community of the people of Israel at Kadesh in the Paran desert, where they brought back word to them and to the entire community and showed them the fruit of the land. What they told him was this: "We entered the land where you sent us, and indeed it flows with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. However, the people living in the land are fierce, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakim there. The Amalekite live in the area of the Negev. The Hittite, the Usavites, and the Amorites live in the hills, and the Canaanites live by the sea and along the Jordan." Caleb silenced the people around Moshe and said, "We ought to go up immediately and take possession of it. There is no question that we can conquer it." But the men who had gone with him said, "We can't attack these people because they are stronger than we are." And they spread a negative report about the land they had reconnoitered for the people of Israel by saying, "The land we passed through in order to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. All the people we saw there were giant. We saw the Nephilim the descendants of Anak and from the Nephilim to ourselves, we look like grasshoppers by comparison, and we look that way to them too. So not only are they telling you what they thought, they're telling you what the other people thought, even though they didn't ask them anything. This is the pattern that God's setting up. Watch who we take counsel to, because all of these people were focused on the negative things. And I can tell you, I've done this myself. I felt like God was telling me to do something, and I asked for advice or something. And really, what I was doing, if I had to check my heart at the time, was I was looking for a reason not to do it. And the more people I talked to, the more reasons they came up with, and I ended up not doing it. And when we do that, what we're doing is saying, anybody but God, I need advice from. Because if God's told you to do it, it's going to be okay. No matter what happens, it's going to be okay. So let's break down Numbers and see what we find here in Numbers chapter 13. Basically, 13 and 14 are one long story. But remember, we broke them up into chapters and verses to make it easier for people like us. So when we get to chapter 14, we'll see some more of these consequences kind of unfold. But like the story of Joseph, though, in Egypt, this is a pattern and a type, and it's set up to be both true and historical with meaning, as well as being prophetic and a metaphor. So a type that will be repeated by the church, because this is what happens. We should have been a story about triumph, or what should have been a story about triumph turns into a narrative about disbelief and failure and weakness and repudiation, really, of God's grace. This story is kind of like Adam and Eve. And like I said, we're going to set all these patterns in motion. So when we get to the New Testament, you're going to be able to point back at all of these things. Adam and Eve had been created by the master potter, but then they gave in to their evil nature, the fear, the doubt. Israel had just days earlier been consecrated by the Lord, given his Torah, and were in the constant presence of Jehovah. He was there, but they threw all of that away to obey their fears and desires because they wanted to be safe and they were scared of what they were hearing. So Israel got right up to the edge of centuries of promise, 400 plus centuries of promise, and they quit. They turned back and refused to live in that promise. What we want to do sometimes is, God, smooth it out and I'll go live there. And God's like, I promised you something. It's as smooth as it's supposed to be. If I wanted it smoother, it'd be smoother. But I want you to go live in that promise, not the way the promise should be according to you or me. That's not what God says at all. He wants us to live in it. And so they decided, hey, all that promise, we don't want it. We're going to go back and live in the desert, basically. We're going to go back and live in rebellion. So Numbers 13 says that God told Moses to send spies, but in Deuteronomy 4 says that the people wanted to send spies. So the answer is in a Hebrew word for send. In Hebrew, shalah lekha is literally means send for yourself. So God is telling Moses, if you want to send some of the spies, you have my permission. Don't send them on my behalf, but if you want to, go right ahead, send it for yourself. So God was responding to a request from Moses, and Moses was responding to the people. So Jehovah tells Moses, go ahead and satisfy himself and the people. After all, God knew what was in the land of Canaan. It's not like they were going to come back and go, God, did you know this? It was the people of Israel who were unsure. And that's where we really got to be careful. Don't follow somebody who hasn't shown a pattern of being fully reliant on God, but also don't try to talk somebody out of it who has shown a pattern of that. Then you can get behind that person and say, whatever happens, happens. I'm okay with it because I believe God's in this. So what was instructed was to go see the land in order to reassure the people. It wasn't to go find things that were wrong with it. So in verse 16, one of the tribal leaders had his name changed by Moses. Hoshea, son of Nun, Hoshea became known as Joshua, or more accurately in the Hebrew, Yehoshua. Yehoshua. So Hoshea means God saves, and Yehoshua means Jehovah saves. So part of the reason is that Hoshea was born in Egypt, and God did not reveal his own name, Yahweh or Jehovah, until he gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai. So the name Joshua, Yehoshua, could not have existed when Israel was in Egypt because God's name wasn't even known there. So basically what he did was he took a generic word, God, and gave him God's actual name as part of his name. So in the book of Joshua, it will be Yehoshua, Joshua, that leads the people into the promised land. So our Savior's Hebrew name was Yeshua, which is just a contraction of Yehoshua, Yehovah saves, Jesus. Joshua, Yehoshua, Yeshua are all the same name, just in different dialects and languages from different eras. So the Torah of Moses leads people up to the ultimate promised land, but not into it. For that, it took Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. So basically, if you look at the Torah, brings us really close, but there's something missing. And we learn that it's actually Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, that can get us into that promised land. So the scouts were to check out the people, the land, the towns, and see how things grow. Whether the people of Canaan were fierce warriors was not an issue for Moses. The season is the time of the first grape ripening, which means summer. July, August kind of time frame. It was going to be hot going through the Negev too. So it was probably a distance of about 250 miles from Kadesh to Lebo Hamath. So it took about 40 days to get there and back. So why was Hebron a destination? Because Abraham was buried there. It was Hebron that Abraham was promised the land. That's where he was. It was beautiful and fertile and good for pasture and good for crops. So the scout party ran into 3 men called Anakites. Who they are is really uncertain. We don't find that out, but we do know they were a race of tall people, and they were compared to the Nephilim and the Rephaim in Genesis pre-flood when they were giants. So for some reason, we're told that Hebron was founded 7 years earlier than Zoan. Zoan would later be called Tanis and made the capital of Egypt at about the same time King David made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. Some of that will come out in later books. So they go to a place called Eshcol and find big grapes. So it's a metaphor for how fertile the land would appear. If we knew Hebrew better, we would see many of the verses of the Bible rhyme too, because these were created as a way to help memorize them. Children are taught songs, the ABC song or whatever it is, the presidents, the months of the year. Well, same thing they did in Hebrew. This was a way for them to learn this by making it rhyme. So they first tell Moses and then the whole community. It means the elders and the leaders of Israel, they would go and tell everybody in their clans and tribes. So they say, we came to the land where you sent us, not the land the Lord promised or the land that was sworn to Abraham, but they call it the land you sent us. So they disassociated themselves with the promise from the covenant and from God by saying it's just land. For them, this was a political, economic matter. In the first part of their report, the group offers kind of a positive view, and they show Moses the fruit in response to the question, was it a fertile, was it wooded? Meaning, did they support large plants and crops? And the scouts' assessment was scaring the leaders and the elders. So in verse 30, we see Caleb hushed the people, and he said, okay, enough reality. We know what we're up against. Now let's go and take the land that God promised us. The other scouts and the elders, though, decided it was suicide. It was too scary. They didn't want to go through with it. And here's the problem, though. The scouts and the elders were in rebellion against Jehovah, against God. Their refusal to take God at his word was the greatest insult to his holiness. Because if you've had children and you've said, trust me, and they're like, no, and it's like you get so frustrated that they would question you. and you get upset about it. Imagine how God feels when he says this will work out. And we're like, no, I don't think so. I'm going to go ask Joe, or I'm going to ask Fred. It's like, come on, let's have a little bit more trust than that. And our rebellion against God is that we don't do things. Sometimes we think, well, I just got to not say bad words and not do bad things. But sometimes the rebellion is not doing what he told you to do. And when he tells you to go forgive somebody or apologize to somebody or fix something, you need to go do it, because that's rebellion against his holiness. We focus on the obstacles sometimes and look away from him, and then we become afraid. If you've ever gone skydiving or something, the instructor will always tell you, keep your eyes on me. Pay attention to what's going on right here. Don't look around, just listen to my voice and keep focused on me. And then you still jump out of a plane with the parachute. So that's probably a bad idea either way. But so we think if it's difficult and dangerous, it can't be from the Lord. But that kind of thinking has probably killed more blessings and victories than any other. It's just a false assumption to think God's not going to ever send you to anywhere that could be dangerous or could be what the world calls a failure, because his plans are greater than ours, and we're not going to understand everything. But 10 of those 12 scouts were about to find out just how seriously God takes his covenants, his commands, and the rights and duties of his people to assume their place in the land of promise. They're all going to find that out. We're going to find that out in the next chapter. So God bless. Share this with somebody you love, even somebody you don't love, because that's just a great way to introduce people to the Word of God. Love God, love people, and change the world.